We believe that given our thinking, and much more important, the history of the PFD and our involvement in different spheres of the life of our people, that we deserve to be elected, or at least given a very substantial and significant vote, which will give us a voice or be one of key players in government in Lesotho. And maybe, as we are saying, why is that? We have been a party pursuing constitutional democracy. In fact, that is exactly our name. That was the relevant about it, that we have a name that talks about democracy, which also implies that we are looking at a myriad of forces. That is why it's called a front. I know we have never debated that concept. Why are you the only party that calls yourself a front? It's because in terms of our thinking, it is only a very broad front of democratic forces from all angles and permutations that would help this country move forward. So our appeal to those different forces, to those different formations, is the one that we think finally will win the day, because no single party only on its own will forward other formation of society, which are not necessarily political parties, because political parties, they pursue more the question of power, but the question of the interests, the issues of bread and butter. Though a political party would claim in quotes that it's pursuing that, but we know its main involvement is power, and all its energy is consumed. And the ABC is a classical example of people who, precisely because they were only coming mainly for power and access to resources, that seems to be the only day. And then the forces that will dampen and bring order to this whole thing, it is as the PFD envisaged. If you look at our manifesto, we first of all talk of the partnership. The first one is the constitutional one between the local and central government, which the constitution itself must delineate different layers and powers and even sources of funding of the local government, so that the local government is not at the mercy of the central government. And good enough, at least we are able to achieve that. I'm the Minister of Constitutional Affairs now, and I'm pushing that. I'm happy that it's one of the issues that when I got to NRA, we pushed it hard, because we think that democratization must also go with devolution, which is constitutional guaranteed. Remember I said we have been pursuing constitutional democracy, and we are not doing it from a theoretical perspective, practically. That's why first of all I was studying at this question of the local government issues, which are constitutional guaranteed, not nice slogans of decentralization, which a lot of people have subscribed to, without concretely pursuing and guaranteeing that democracy takes off. The second layer, which is much deeper now, which is political, it is the partnership of government or political parties with mass formations, be it with the workers, be it the peasants and farmers, as we call them, be it with the business community, especially about Lesotho patriotic business community, those who can protect the interests of the country. Then the other formations like the women, the youth, and other sectors. So to us, we also want to see those people being brought, and again, we should have legal guarantees, not necessarily constitutional, which is different from the one I was talking about at the local government center. But this one we see statutory agreements where, if we give an example of farmers, because this country, we also see it as moving through, changing the agriculture, revolutionizing it. So government must have a law that provides for what we call farmers or farming commission, which would be the whole body that deals with land, farming, and all those things, so that we don't have, the know-it-all government officials and ministers, who runs everybody up and down. They bring the regulations from nowhere, parachuting themselves, bringing everything on top of the people. And we think that we are fighting that there should be also laws that regulate and governs the relationship, the partnership between government and farmers in the first place, because that is where the main resources of this country are, in the rural areas, in the villages. And obviously, to us, that will be one of the first tests to see whether you can force government to be partnership. So if these forces appreciate our call, we should be in a position to, as I'm saying, be given a very substantial vote, because we are releasing the power of the people, not the power of the party. Other people, they want everything to, to grab, have all the seats in parliament, but having the power to themselves. That is our philosophy. That's what we are fighting for. And we believe that maybe in this election, difficult as they are, given COVID and all other things that are there, that this message should resonate with our people. They should be able to understand the call that the PFD is making. The third aspect is our anti-corruption. We have pioneered even the whole declaration regime of asset declaration. I know that it has never been come to what we were believing in, but thanks goodness, I'm now again the minister of DCO who is supposed to be driving the anti-corruption. I have brought very new regulations from next month, which is March, where the whole sorts of people will start declaring up to end of June. And then on the other side, after the 30th of June, then we should be able to say which officers of His Majesty have not declared, especially those we have to declare annually, very clearly. It is a well-known fact that my deputy seconded Mr. Mataba when they moved in Parliament a private member's bill, which has now turned into what is called the 10th Amendment after my 9th Amendment to the Constitution. So the 10th Amendment was also instigated more or less by the PFD, because my deputy was there with Ndade Mataba. And that really is not something that we just sucked from the air. After the beginning of 2018, there was a deliberate effort that was done by political parties to study the demarcation, just to have it was, of course, there was a desktop kind of research that we are mandated with the leader of the PL, Ndade, on behalf of the political parties. I'm actually the secretary of political parties that are registered with the IEC. So in that capacity, we are mandated to just cast abroad and look the practices, because we are worried that there must be something wrong. One of the first things we discovered is that we are the only country in the world where, when you are looking for a quota, you divide the population, the voting population, with the number of constituencies. The worldwide practice is that you divide the whole population, because an MP serves that population. Because if you do that, certain age groups can be distorted in certain areas, which is exactly some of the things that we will find in Lesotho now. That if only you say it's only this population, we are only taking a certain age, you will have that distortion, because that age might not be there, like people migrate to other areas but still having homes there. And so we found that we are the only country. So which means people who did that, they never understood how constituencies, they didn't apply their mind scientifically to how constituencies are done in the world. They just thought that, okay, because you have these people who are going to vote, so if you bring a constituency, let's find how many voters, not the real population of people who live there, whom the member of parliament is going to be giving service to. So that's the first thing we got. The second one, it is what we call the tolerance limit between the constituencies. In other words, what is the difference between constituencies? Because you cannot have them, as equal like money or 10 rand or something like that. We found that varies, and that's another very big area, a very interesting area that we found out. The other countries start with 5%, but we also have countries that go to 35%. And then we try to find the reason why are countries so different in terms of this. We found that some countries like Singapore, which have a very congested city and have outlying areas, that feeds the city, are around 30%. Then you have to reflect that in Lesotho. With the cities you have, or lowlands, cities, villages, mountains, all that, is 10% appropriate for Lesotho? And we found that it's not, because the geographic and topographic differences in our country would really not be helpful to use the 10%. And that's why we propose as early as 2018 that we should have the 25% difference. And so that's why we stand. So that's why we are supporting that bill in Parliament. But I think we are not new in this debate. 2008, after the 10 years of the delimitation of 98, I raised an issue with the IEC and the Attorney General that, look, the Constitution said we should demarcate or review the delimitation within 8 and 10 years. But then, at that time, 2008, we are just about to be beyond the 10 years. Then I asked them, I said, what happens if a madman challenges the delimitation, even the outcome of elections, because you delimit constituencies after 10 years, while the Constitution prescribes a certain period? So that's again where we are. Of course, at that time, I can still give you the opinion. Mr. Lekhetho said, the better that they do that in speed, because we might find ourselves operating in an illegal way. He said that. I do have an opinion. So now we have 2 years. At that time, it was 2008, when Mr. Lekhetho, I think it was months, that the IEC must, put its act in order and finalize the delimitation. We are well over now. It's exactly 2 years ourselves, and we are still continuing. First of all, we fought a court order that says after 10 years you proceed, or a legislative instrument that says that. So we are saying it is important that we review, but also the whole question of legality after 10 years, we are also subscribing that we don't think that helps. Of course, the Attorney General and the other officers think that could be proceeded, but we are saying you need a court order. You need, if there's no court order, you need a legislative instrument that allows you to proceed. So that is our stance, really. It's made from science. It's not that fanatical thing that people think that is because we want to hold on so-called Congress constituencies. We don't believe in that. In any event, let me just finalize that issue. These people who are ignoring this argument about the numbers are going to this is going to haunt them very soon. I talked about the local government in terms of our approach. So I know this time we are bound to say, when we allocate money, we are going to be forced to look at numbers. So the very people now, even the people in the villages, who don't care about this argument now, will come to the party, because it will be whether somebody who come to the Maseru here in the industrial areas, whether when we allocate money, should we ignore that he lives in that district just because he'll come to Maseru? So that question is very soon going to haunt us, and Chigna will come home to roost. So that is our submission, that we have to be very careful. We have to look at the trends in the world. We shouldn't just act for opportunistic. I know people are accusing us that we want the old constitution to be retained, but we think we are bringing more science, more objectivity in the whole debate. Our approach has always been that the unemployment is exacerbated by the fact that we don't produce anything to the market ourselves. And we had made several attempts where we wondered if people have to be licensed that we should make a condition that there are certain Lesotho products that any licensee, we have to find whether he should not be able to use a Lesotho product of some sort. That would also sound ridiculous. I have also argued that even a taxi owner, we have to look into the very, the mess that they put in the cars, the cover, the seat covers and all those things. There's no reason why we should not be insisting on that. So Lesotho is not, we are also suffering a huge unemployment precisely because there's no production. So we thought that by the license, we should not only talking about Lesotho own business, but those business must have Lesotho made products, a certain quota. Even starting from an ordinary shop or a cafe, is our feeling. Whether it's even 1%, we should start there. But there must be that obligation. I insist that even a bar, even though of course they will be producing the beers and which will be apparently produced here in Lesotho, but I would insist that we have classes that really get broken. Just imagine what kind of member of Maona when they have Bome Pochwan. Maybe they are not there because we cannot say the so getting to the because we have never systematically and intentionally, deliberately made that the local products be in the market. Lesotho somehow, even if we start introducing certain quotas or certain industries, so that we start producing ourselves. Otherwise, we only all talk that we are going to get our own Chinese and what. Here they are now after AGOA, some are already living. And there's not much that we have done. So in other words, we are quite alive to that. So the youth, we are also worried because of their education, especially after COVID. And we want something particular attention to be paid to that. And we feel that the whole question here, the funding, the manpower funding has to be revisited completely. We need a complete reform in that angle. So we feel that there must be a new approach, and we're working on it in our manifesto, where we are talking about even the education reform itself, so that the whole question of youth unemployment is related also to the nature of our education, the character of the education that we have. And we feel that something must be done to tackle that. So that will be my basic response to this question of unemployment and poverty. Let me start from that one of corruption, and then I will end up just generally dealing with apathy, if we will be able to deal with it. Yes, I said corruption. We are known to be an anti-corruption party. And right now, if you can look at, I know that was not well covered, the 50 million. From no reason, I don't know why. It's very late when I start making noise about the man who is behind this, who is still in jail, late. Nobody wants to talk about him, that he has been captured, that we have attached, it's around 30 million in his account in South Africa, and attached a lot of property. And we are now trying to retrieve that money back to Lesotho, forfeiting that money now coming back to Lesotho. And so we are very clear in terms of very strong anti-corruption measures that we want to be. For instance, in Parliament, we make it openly that if we have a very good chairperson of the Committee on Ethics, I have been trying to help all the time and reminding the nation that the most important also regime on declaration, the one in Parliament, because we can go and open a register of members and people are just taking their feet. But we have never hidden that to the nation. And I remember when I was the Deputy Speaker, I took that committee and actually mobilized funds to have it go around South Africa, make reports, and developed a code of conduct which will include this question of declaration of assets, which would also be done in public, because the shortfall about the DCO is that because it's an investigating body, it doesn't put the declaration that people make there. So the proper one, it is the one that's done in Parliament. And that's why people and political parties are deliberately dragging their feet. But we have never hidden that. That is why we also always feel that once we can have a say in the drafting of a coalition agreement, which we are not right now, we are denied that. It was only the question of us trying to help the other fellows who put that coalition together, would insist on that and put time to that declaration regime in Parliament, because that is where a lot of issues start going wrong. That is where the real signal that we want to fight corruption should be starting from there. But you also raised this issue of apartheid now because of these issues of corruption. So yes, our message, as we said, is that if power is only concentrated in the politicians, people will lose hope. So that is why we have this approach where we want a coalition of other formations to take part and to be in partnership with government, because then the interest, the understanding of the running of government and the intricacies in government itself would be exposed to the ordinary people. But if it is us only politicians who are doing that, that is why it's going to be very easy that people start giving up. So we feel that if people vote PFD, if people want to increase, and we have more say, these are some of the steps that we'll take to include the people. People are talking about, so even democracy now we can start talking about inclusive democracy. Maybe that has never been that we only talk about democracy. So I think we have to develop that term called inclusive democracy, or even democracy where we make it deliberately that the people monitor what their people does. Actually, we have an operation called Operation Ochlap, where you make sure that this government officials and other people stick to the mandate. Otherwise, the country is facing a big crisis. That is a difficult one also, especially because of the culture of now these different groups, our farmer groups, who are now politically aligned. You can see how people go to political parties where they get the coverage. So how on earth would we rid ourselves of crime, while people who openly, everybody knows that they do crime, they kill people, they use political party as their hideouts, and our people, just because they want to be seen as many, that you can have a crowd of people who are criminals and they drum up support for yourself. I don't know how one can have to deal with these political parties that people do that. So I'm saying, instead of condemning crime, if you allow people who openly do crime, who kill people, and masquerade them there as heroes, as people who entertain your crowds, we are in trouble. So crime here is a very fertile ground. Is being, sort of tilted and, be shielded by politicians. It's a pity. Maybe we must even have to change the code of conduct, that no political party would be seen to be doing that with criminals. Now we also have these people of Manomo, this thing has really, and I'm in that department, where I understand the depth of the problem that we have. And maybe the whole thing is that the economy, bringing up the economy also will help, so that, the desperation, people do some of these things out of desperation. People look at our people now when they're Bodisa Masami, because that's where they are. And because of that desperation and the very difficult condition, inhuman condition that they operate, they become such animals altogether. So it's a very broad thing. And so it's the poverty, it's all these things. But I think stock theft and other things, we still have to have. So the criminals are now blackmailing everybody. So again, to us, is again empowerment of the other forces. I know that we have Mogela. Mogela might be small, but you need a better strategy, quite well-oiled, but supported also by the people to bring order in the villages. Especially I'm saying the stock theft because it deals with the poor of the poor in the villages. They're the ones who are dealt a very serious blow in terms of that. So that is the one, at least if I'm asked where should we start in terms of dealing with crime, it will be that. And once you bring order in the villages, so all these other criminals that arouse there, maybe we can start seeing whether they will be in towns here. But in the villages, if we bring more order, dealing with stock theft, then we will start dealing with this one. So to me, that would be my priority list in terms of how to deal with crime in the country. As I said earlier, we talked about a very serious reforms in the education. That is why we look at tertiary. When we looked at the whole issue of scholarship, accessing funding, but much more importantly, for what, which is also the issue, which is the biggest crisis. We believe that our education should be towards production, and I know there's been this shift of the new curriculum, which unfortunately we have not resourced it well. It might be more damage than the good that we are thinking of, but we know that at least it was made with good intentions, that let's allow the talents and the gifts that young people have, the students, allow them to nurture that. But I think it is the resources. It is also whether it's also based in what is happening in the villages, what is happening in the country. So the education must be also made part and parcel of our production system, so that we don't have just people who are supposed to be educated and only from a very theoretical perspective, not in a practical sense, because we have to move the economy. That education, if it's not relevant to the economy, then even the resources, even the investment that's made there, which I know as a country we do. We are one of the countries, especially at primary and other level, where we invest a lot. But because we are not also complementing other resources that make it effective, then all that resources and investment goes to waste. So we think there must be a serious reform on the educational front. Indeed, they have been institutionalized in some other areas. When I got to tourism, I found that region they have been given mantabising, and I took them out. I think we wanted to make a very clear message that some of us don't tolerate people, and now we know because our people, because they want the resources to go and win elections, so some of them will always allow the Chinese to sort of bamboozle them. They do as they wish because they want the millions that they're going to give them, and then also sell the country. So it is really not the influence, but it's also the question of people who want to abdicate their responsibilities so that they get money, easy money. Some personally, remember where people talked about even groceries, where people go and get groceries from John and other Chinese. Then people get money also to campaign. And so that is clearly we have that, unless also maybe you are talking also at the state to state, which is the Chinese government itself also. But here I was talking about the ordinary business people who, a lot of our politicians have been, looking for finance from them. And that's why Lesotho also have to make sure that they finance their politicians. They come together and make sure that but with conditions of what they do. Because the problem is that people have always been giving politicians money, or they fund political parties for conditions of what they represent. And I think that's also, so that has given Chinese, of course, we have more money, we have resources that they want, that are going to do it. And of course, people also complain about the China as a country. And so that one is a big problem because we don't have resources. So normally people again will always go to China to get very easy maybe loans. Of course, at times those loans might be unsustainable But that's the aspect we have. That's why I was saying maybe the Chinese talking about the state, but I think basically we are talking about the business people here. We had said earlier that in principle, we are not against reconciliation. Amnesty would just be one of the instruments that we use if we agree on it. So our understanding that we need a broad agreement on this question of reconciliation and peace. So we see that in that broad sense, that at times when you have a nation, but I think for now, those who wanted the court system to continue have won the day for now at least. And we are saying, let's do it. Let's make sure that we proceed with the cases. Let us not see this endless postponement and all these other things. So, as I'm saying, in principle, we wanted that. That's why I've decided to shelve that bill. You remember I took the bill to Parliament. But because there was so much controversy, people who find it very cheap, even people who are useless, who have no ideas, they thought that by being against that law, I said, okay, let's put it aside. Let's see how far this project of justice can go and give it time. And then maybe later, people will come back and see, okay, we still need reconciliation. So it's really a question of time. But as I'm saying, I'm now Minister of Justice. So if people want to proceed with cases, let's proceed. And let's proceed with every case, not selective justice, which I suspect is the case now. But so there will be time when we will seriously deal with this question of reconciliation and other things. But for now, if people are not ready, we should not force them.